There is little in business that is more fun than securing a great outcome. Over the next decade, the opportunity to do that is going to come up much more often.
Please welcome CFO at 90, Tim Weerasiri.
Good morning. It's bright up here, but let's get started. So a moment ago, a couple of years, I started at a bright Series A venture-backed business in LA. It was a great business. They'd found product market fit in their core offering, and they'd gotten to profitability in just a handful of years. They had 5 or 6 mega clients that made up 90% of revenue, but they hadn't landed a new deal in 2 years. For the CEPAs in the room, I know your heads all went to the 4 C's, thinking through customer capital and the risk there, but that wasn't even the biggest issue. What they'd done was 2 years ago, their biggest client had come to them and said, hey, you do such a great job with our software, you should run our call center too. So this tiny software company spins up a call center, and everyone in leadership gets distracted dealing with this whole new business line. In this product line, the software infrastructure is different. The real estate footprint's different, the staff you need is different, even some of the leadership you need is different. I was brought in to help raise more capital for the business, maybe raise a Series B, just because they were no longer profitable and trying to figure out what to do. When I arrived, 10% of the revenue was driving 40% of the business costs, but they couldn't see that. At the same time, the CEO, who was in his late 50s with small children, wasn't really sure or didn't seem to know his direction anymore, and I had to sit down and really ask him, what are your goals? This is before my CEPA, so I didn't have the tools to ask about the prepare gate. I didn't know about 3 legs on stools. I was just doing what seemed to make sense. He just didn't have the time or energy to raise a Series B and really drive the company forward, but he'd seemed to have lost sight of where he was going. And so, in response to some of his answers, we actually came up with an exit plan instead. By refocusing the sales team, giving the call center business to another customer, getting rid of some seats, we landed another behemoth company, dropped 40% of our costs, and got back on a path that led to the sale of the business to one of the Silicon Valley giants. We got $100 million for the company. This is not a unique story, which is what's crazy to me. There comes a moment in every growing business when the wheels, they start to wobble. Your clients, the business owners, they'll feel it in the meetings that go nowhere. You'll see it in the KPIs, or even worse, you don't see it in the KPIs. You can sense it in the team. They're talented, they're committed, they're hungry, but they're constantly stuck reacting instead of actually executing. If you have a client who's a business owner who's hit that inflection point, chances are they're in what we at 90 call stage 3. And so I'm Tim Weerasiri, I'm CEPA, and I'm the CFO of 90. I've had the good fortune of being along for the ride on 6 exits so far in my career. I've been working in tech companies. Together, those 6 companies have added $2 billion of revenue growth to the top line, and the cumulative exit total thus far for the 6 companies is $10 billion. I don't claim to know everything, but I have lived through most of what you shouldn't do again. And so that's what the basis of this talk is. We've all heard the saying, but we haven't always internalized it, what got you here, won't get you there. And it's true. If your clients want to scale and eventually exit, they have to start managing the business and start building a machine that can really run it. So let's wrap our heads around sort of stage 3 and the 5 stages of development that we talk about at 90. So stage 1, there's an owner, there's a couple of people, there's an idea, and they're striving for product market fit. They're trying to make some sales. There's usually 2 levels in the company, the owner and the people who report to him, right? And then stage 2, now there's sort of 2 or 3 levels in the organization, so they've hired some ground level people who are doing the work. They have product market fit, but they're still sort of struggling every day to keep the lights on, a single reseller drop or a single customer drop could really throw a spanner in the works. Stage 3 is where complexity really starts to multiply, right? There's now 4 layers in the organization. There's a real leadership team. not always fighting for survival, but just trying to figure out how to grow. The business is also usually looking out a quarter or so, and so that's how you can get a sense of where they're at, like how far forward are they looking. By stage 4 and 5, the business starts to look like a real company. They've solved a lot of the growing pains, they're starting to scale and grow, they're looking out a year, 2 years, 3 years. There's 4 to 5 levels in the company, and they're generally moving fairly effectively. Most businesses I have worked with, and most of the business owners you should encounter, will probably be stuck at stage 3, because it's when things get complicated. They're no longer this scrappy startup relying on owner instinct and hustle. There's finally a team in place, there's products and services that work, but now complexity multiplies. The systems and people that served us well early on can really start to become bottlenecks. So progress slows, frustration builds, and what might feel like a temporary dip is actually something that many companies get stuck in for years. So the antidote lies in operational maturity. Specifically, it lies in 3 foundational elements: people, meetings, and data. These aren't revolutionary ideas by any stretch of the imagination. Like at 90, we just call them core competencies. But by applying discipline to them in a structured way, it's what really separates scalable companies from those that stall. So start with people. So I was recently working for a company in Texas, or working with a company in Texas, and they were having a ton of trouble. There's a massive backlog of issues. The owner had started the company a few years prior, and as he was growing the business, he'd hired this super high energy analyst. She was everything he could ask for in terms of reliability, hard work, accountability, ownership. She was, for a few years, every time he had an issue, she was his first call, and she'd move heaven and earth to get things done. I think we can all identify with this story. And so then the company brought me in because they'd gone through an exit process. The owner thought he was going to get $5 million for the business, and the offer he got was $1.2 million. I think we can all identify with that too. So when we started going through the issues and how to solve them, every single time a new issue came up, the same number 2, his number 2, she would just speak up. She was the first to speak, she was clearly shouldering all of the responsibility, and then she was the bottleneck on getting anything done. Everyone sort of ceded all responsibility to her. So I asked the question, I was like, how much would you pay for a business that is basically the efforts of a single person and has this glaring single point of failure right in the middle of your operation? In stages 1 or 2, your clients are focused on survival, but at stage 3, the leadership has to evolve. You can't have single executives or even just all the executives doing all of the work. They need leaders who will drive accountability, and this can mean transitioning some team members into new seats. Some cases, out of the company altogether. When a company comes to me stuck in stage 2 or 3, it's not a hire they need, it's usually a termination. The disease is also easy to diagnose. It's almost always there's somebody who started out as an assistant and has since become the owner's go-to person. It isn't necessarily their fault that they were over-promoted, but over time, people delegated their responsibilities to them, and they really became the sort of Jack and Jane of all trades, the like master of none. To get beyond stage 2 or 3, all your leadership needs to be able to be more specialized. Unfortunately, that second in command needs to transition into the right seat, a different seat, or ultimately no seat at all. So meetings are next. So I was consulting for this organization. They were squarely in the stage 3 category. There's a team member I'll refer to as Jim. I have to be careful with some of these because I found there's like a lot of like LinkedIn ninjas in here, and after the talk, someone was like, you were talking about Chris, weren't you? I'm like, no. But so Jim is a member of this over-promoted group I mentioned in the previous section, and a lot of decisions filtered through him. And Jim had been put in charge of this partnership contract that the owner didn't have time to deal with, or really, I don't think he just didn't want to. And so the organization had a goal. It was $30 million of revenue for the year. And this deal that Jim was heading up was $120,000. So it's not negligible, but it's also not really material to the business or the operation. So one Monday morning, doing a leadership meeting, Jim rushes into the office. He interrupts the Monday morning meeting. He's There's this problem with the deal. We really need to address it right now. Client's super upset. I think they might walk. Everyone in the room pivots to Jim. Meeting goals are now derailed, they're unmet. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this contract isn't even material, but I'm also often like the finance gremlin in the corner, like no one wants to listen to me. And so I watch and observe as the owner gives Jim the floor and he directs the engineering team to like sketch out this solution, and they spend a 2-week sprint and ultimately a month building this thing out, which ended up costing $200,000 of people time to save this $120,000 customer. The owners were baffled as to why they couldn't scale beyond stage 3. So many stage 3 companies suffer from these reactive, unproductive meetings. There's a lot of talk, a lot of updates, and very little decision making. This results in a ton of activity without much impact. The goal is to shift from ad hoc disruption to a structured rhythm. This means setting annual goals, holding quarterly planning sessions, and running weekly meetings that focus on solving the most urgent and important issues. Meetings should ladder up from team actions to company goals, and they should be the heartbeat of your execution engine. A Harvard Business Review study found that senior managers, like 71% of them, thought that meetings were unproductive and a waste of time. So that's evidence that we should really put some structure into meetings, or it's just not worth doing. 90 has a tool that facilitates automated agendas and prioritization of meeting topics. I've observed in over 20 years of working with small businesses that more money is wasted on the inappropriate use of meetings than like really on any other financial leak. When short-term execution is dictating relevance and order, your clients will run from like one dumpster fire to the other. They miss long-term benchmarks, they tread water, they waste time, and they waste money. Then there's data, last core competency. So a few years ago, I started this small professional services business that was looking for an exit. And so I went to my first Monday morning meeting with the leadership there, and they pulled up a KPI scorecard. And it had sales, sales by region, sales by person, cash flows, hours delivered. There's a glaring problem with this scorecard, right? I was going to ask the question to the audience, but I can't see any of you, so I'll just have to, I'll pretend I asked the question. So the scorecard, it told us what just happened to us, right? Like sales, cash, hours delivered. It doesn't tell us what's going to happen to us, right? Without that foresight, your clients have no way of getting out of reactive problem solving, right? They can't really drive value. In the early stages of a business, like stage 1, stage 2, gut instinct and hustle can really drive results. But at scale, clients need clarity. Can your clients answer the question, are we winning or losing, and are we going to win or lose? If not, they need measurable KPIs that track not just financials and delivery data, but progress across goals, people, and key leading indicators. Simplicity is really key with scorecards. The best scorecards aren't bloaty spreadsheets, they're just focused tools that surface issues quickly. There's a McKinsey report from 2021 that says that companies that regularly track KPIs are twice as likely to hit their goals. Probably didn't need a McKinsey study on that one, but what ties all this together is the concept of a unified operating system. Think of it as like the nervous system of the business. It's a set of shared frameworks, tools, cadences that align people and processes. It's not about rigid rules, it's about repeatable excellence. A good operating system combines the time-tested best practices with custom-fit execution. It includes structured planning, disciplined meetings, rhythms, and tools that track real progress. More importantly, it creates a culture of accountability and clarity. Most companies don't fail because they lack ambition or talent. They plateau because they haven't installed the infrastructure that allows the owner to get out of the weeds. Until they do that, they can't scale, and we certainly can't get them an exit. Everything's a risk, but companies that break through stage 3 accelerate towards meaningful exits. Those that don't often plateau indefinitely, or worse, they regress. The difference isn't vision and hustle, it's the underlying systems. So if you have a business owner that's ready to scale and exit and is coming to you with problems or frustrations because they feel stuck, like the key questions are sort of, do you have leaders that are building leaders, not just doing work? Are your meetings focused focused, structured, and aligned with your company goals? And can we clearly see where we're winning and losing across all your teams in the company? And can you see where you're going to go? If you ask those 3 questions, you can get them thinking about this sort of stuff and get them to a structured place. If the answer is no, it's time to evolve. It's time for them to get serious about these core competencies. It's time for them to stop being the engine of their business and start really being the architect of its growth. Thank you.